Today we're going to take a look at interval notation and how it looks on the number line. So the interval that we're given here is the interval from 3 to infinity. So the first thing we'll want to do is just mark 3 on our number line. Make sure you don't put it over here to the left of 0 because that's not where 3 is. 3 is to the right of 0. Right? You don't need to necessarily count out the 1, 2, 3 if you don't want to. I don't need you to do that. Right? Just make sure you indicate that 3 is on the right side of 0. Okay? When you have a parenthesis means that is an open circle. If we were to have brackets on our interval at an endpoint, that would mean that we would make it a filled-in circle. Right? So since this is a parenthesis at 3, the parenthesis is on the 3, we'll make an open circle at 3. And then all we have to think about is which direction is positive infinity. Well, positive infinity is to the right of 3. So we'll draw our ray going to the right of 3. And that's it. That's the graph of 3 to infinity on a number line. In this case, we're looking at the graph of negative infinity to 4. So we're going to have an endpoint at 4. Just make sure it's to the right of 0. We're going to put a filled-in circle at the 4, right? Because it's got a bracket on the 4. And then we have to think about where is negative infinity. Well, negative infinity is not over here to the right. Negative infinity is over here to the left. So we want all the solutions between negative infinity, all the way to the left, and positive 4. So we'll draw our arrow pointing to the left. For this one, we're looking at negative 5 to infinity. So we'll put our negative 5 over here to the left, right? Just like on this one, we had 4 to the right. We want our negative 5, make sure it's to the left of your 0. And we'll put a bracket just like the last one because our endpoint was a closed endpoint. Or so we have a bracket, so we'll put a closed endpoint. And then we have to think about which direction is positive infinity. Well, that's to the right of negative 5. Positive infinity always means going to the right, whereas negative infinity will always mean going to the left for these number lines. On this one, our endpoint is actually at 0, which is already marked for us. That's convenient. I'll put an open circle because of the parenthesis. And then as we just said, negative infinity is always to the left. So this is telling us we want all the numbers from negative infinity up until 0, basically all the negative numbers. This one looks like an ordered pair, but since we're talking about it as an interval, all we're talking about is the interval of all the numbers from 3 to 7. So we'll put 3 to the right of 0, and we'll put 7 a little bit further to the right of that. And because they're both parentheses, they're both going to be open circles. But we want all the numbers from 3 until we get to 7. So I don't want arrows in opposite directions here, right? That would be wrong. I want the numbers between 3 and 7. So I'll just connect them like that. And that's it. The same thing's going on here. We want all the numbers from negative 3, which is to the left of 0, to 1, which is to the right of 0. The negative 3 should be a closed circle, whereas the 1 should be an open circle. Right? The negative 3 is closed because of the bracket, and the 1 is open because of the parenthesis. We want the numbers between negative 3 and 1, so we'll just connect them like that. Now this one, we've got a little bit different notation. We've got a negative 2, so we'll put our negative 2 on. And we've got a 1, so I'm going to put our 1 on. And we should see that there should be a parenthesis at the, or that we have a parenthesis at the negative 2, so it should be an open circle. And we have a bracket at the 1, so it should be a closed circle. So I've done that portion of it. But then I have this U in the middle. The U effectively means or. It's a union symbol. And it just means or. So on the previous ones, it was kind of like I wanted everything between -3 and 1. Right? Well, in this one, I'm going to want everything on the outside. I don't want the stuff in between. That's not correct. Right? I want to go from -infinity until I get to -2. So that's all the stuff that's to the left of -2. And then I want to go from 1 until I get to infinity. That's all the stuff to the right of 1. So again, I can't be both of those things at once. That's why the union symbol means or. It's either all the stuff to the left of -2, or it's all the stuff to the right of 1. So we'll do one more like this before we kind of switch gears. So again, this time we have -4 and -2 as our endpoints. So make sure, and I found students have a little bit of trouble with the negatives, make sure your -4 is to the left of -2, because -4 is less than -2. The -4 should have a closed circle because it's a bracket, and the -2 should have an open circle because it's a parenthesis. We want all the numbers from -infinity over here until we get to -4, and we want all the numbers from -2 this direction to the right until we get to positive infinity. Now we're going to switch it up and do this in the opposite direction. So instead of having the interval and writing the graph, we're going to have the graph and write the interval. So my endpoint is 4. So I'm going to put a 4. And then I have to look as to whether I'm going to the left or to the right of 4. If I'm going to the right of 4, like I am in this picture, my left endpoint is 4, so I'll put it in a bracket on this side. And then I'm going to the right, and in fact, because of the arrow, I'm going to the right forever, which would be towards infinity. And the infinity will always get a parenthesis because it's not a real number. For this one, my endpoint is 2, so I'm going to put my 2. But 2 is a right endpoint, so I need to have stuff over here to the left of 2. So since it's a right endpoint that needs a parenthesis for the open circle, I'll put the parenthesis on this side. And I will start all the way over here at -infinity because it goes forever to the left. So parenthesis on the infinity, make sure it's a -infinity, and we stop at 2. You can also think about it, what's the furthest left this goes? Well, it starts all the way to the left at -infinity, and it goes till you stop at 2. So it's very similar to the last one. We have an arrow pointing to the left, telling us that we're going all the way to -infinity on the left-hand side, and we just continue on until we stop at -5. And when we stop at -5, it's with a closed circle, meaning that endpoint is included. So we should have a bracket. Here, if we look from left to right, the first place that we have a point is at x equals 3. So we'll start at 3 with a parenthesis because of the open circle. And then it goes forever to the right, so 3 to infinity. And the infinity will get a parenthesis. If I look at the furthest left that this graph goes, the furthest left it goes is -10. So my first endpoint is going to be -10 with a parenthesis. And then if I look, it continues along until I hit -1, and then it stops with an open circle, so a parenthesis. So this is just indicating all the numbers between -10 and -1. This one's fairly similar. The furthest left it goes is -6. There's no arrow pointing to the right over here. or to the left, sorry. We start at -6 with a parenthesis because of the open circle, and it continues along until we hit 7 with a bracket because of the closed circle. For this one, we can see that there's a gap in the middle. So the gap in the middle means it's either this or it's this. For our interval notation, or is the union symbol, the big capital U looking thing. It means union, or it means or. So the furthest left we go is to -infinity because we have an arrow pointing to the left. So we're going to go from -infinity until we get to -6. We stop at -6 with a bracket because of the closed endpoint. The U indicates there's a gap in it here. We have this big gap in the middle. That's the or. And then we pick back up again at 4 with a bracket because of the closed circle until we get to infinity with a parenthesis because it continues to the right forever. And this will be our last one. Similar to the last one, we start all the way over here at -infinity because it's pointing to the left forever. And it continues along until we get to an x value of 2. That x value of 2 has a parenthesis because of the open circle. Then we have a gap in the middle between the two little line segments, or the two rays, right? That gap in the middle means or, which in interval notation is a union symbol. And then we pick back up again at 5 because it's a closed circle. The 5 is a bracket. And then it goes forever to the right, which means to infinity. And that's it. That's how we do our interval notation with the graph of a number line.